Charles Ramson. You have the floor, sir.
May it please you, Mr. Speaker, batting at number 3 today, I rise to make my contribution to this budget debate. And allow me to say at the outset that I believe that the word debate is a misnomer. And after my experience in this House thus far, I think that the most appropriate word would actually be a discussion. Because regardless of how persuasive we are on this side of the House, regardless of how sensible our suggestions might be or amendments might have been, it has not been accepted by this government in all but one occasion. And that's unfortunate because the Honourable Minister of Finance, when he said that there's a lot of rhetoric in relation to unity, I believe that he is adopting a position, or the government is adopting a position of peril when they are intransigent. Because unity, as we know it, starts right here in this very House. Consultation starts right here in this very House. Inclusive democracies start right here in this very House. And that has not been happening. Despite all the lofty addresses we've heard thus far, that has not been happening. And that is surprising because the arrogant attitude displayed by the government, when one would consider the declared results, if we were accepting them to be truthful or an accurate representation of the vote, the margin is just a mere 0.2%, or a swing vote of just 2,300. And when they lost 7 out of 10 regions, they had every reason in the book, to show that to show this nation that they proposed a better way. And that is what this nation wanted. And it's not happening. And the unfortunate thing is that sometimes when trust is lost, it is sometimes never regained. Now let's look at the economy. It's all well and good to come and say that the economy has grown by 3%. But if the people on the street are not feeling it, if they don't feel the benefits of that 3% growth, or that their personal circumstances are improving, then it defeats the purpose. And it also means that there is a qualitative disconnect between what the budget says and what they're feeling, which means that it affects credibility, and in the end, that affects their legitimacy. Now, I was very surprised when I heard in the budget presentation thus far that there was no reports of job losses. Now, it means one of two things. It's either that the government is not speaking to business people, or business people are not speaking to them. Because we're speaking to business people all the time, and guess what? They're also speaking to us. And they're complaining every day. They're saying two things. Number one, they're saying nothing is happening. And number two, they're also saying that money is not circulating. So why is that? Why is this happening? And the real information is actually in the Bank of Guyana figures. Because those are much harder to fudge. And there are 3 indices which paint a better or clearer picture. And number 1 is that narrow money has decreased, that's your M1. Number 2, your broad money has increased, which is your M2. And number 3, that there's deflation in the system. For the first time in recent history, you would have had deflation in the system. And that's a big deal. Now, Why has this happened? If you ever take the time to read the book, The Ascent of Money by Niall Ferguson, you'll understand that finance is a concept in action. And it's based on one thing: confidence. Confidence and confidence alone. And that's exactly where the word credit comes from, actually. Credit comes from the word credere, a Latin word means to believe. And if they have low confidence or no confidence, finance just doesn't work the way that it's supposed to. And if finance doesn't work the way that it's supposed to, it means that people don't spend, people don't borrow, they don't invest, and this causes a reduction in the money in circulation. And then people put their money in their banks instead of using it for productive use. And that is why you have higher M2s, which is more money going into savings. And this causes deflation. And if this continues on a longer term basis, then that is the telltale signs of two things. Number one, you could end up in a deflationary spiral, which most economists would tell you that is actually worse than hyperinflation. And number two, you can end up in capital flight. People will then just transfer their money out of the country or store their money in US currencies where they feel that it's safer. And why is there a loss in confidence? Why has there been this sudden loss in confidence? The government's actions, this is one of the reasons, the government's actions is destroying, and their signals are destroying confidence every single day. The uncertainty about change, the pace of change, the uncertainty about a clear and articulated vision for the future. And if you want to question me about that, then you can go and ask the people on the street. Ask them this one question, which answers the question about vision. Where are we going? And they won't be able to tell you. In fact, if you ask some of the people on the government side, they won't be able to tell you, or they might have divergent views about where are we going. And then there's the fear being created as well. For example, the fear about passing laws giving GRA the power to go and investigate into your bank accounts, or the fear about moves being made to take away your land or property, the fear of higher taxes and increased fees and increased collection, the requirement of certificates of compliance before you obtain government services, the fear of the re-emergence of the people's militia, the fear of military officers seeking to unlawfully detain you or your family members, then chasing them down the road in high-speed, dangerous and reckless chases, and ends up with 3 persons dead, and then the government turns around and say, there's no need for a probe. And then another reason is that there are too many shocks in the system, too many shocks for it to handle. Persons with the institutional knowledge to effectively run the system are being replaced. And they're being replaced oftentimes with political hacks. Persons who are ill-equipped to fill those positions. They're sent on leave for extended periods of time. And I'll give you an example of what I mean. The government budgeted last year in 2015 for $221 billion. And of that amount, $30 billion was not spent. $30 billion was not spent. Now, essentially this government is still acting like it's in opposition. It's still cutting the budget. But this time it's cutting its very own budget. All in all, it can't work. And you've just written the book on how to extract confidence from an economy, and the consequences for the private sector and the people. And don't come and feed this nation the perpetual propaganda that, well, it's China's fault. Well, guess what? Number one, China is still growing at 7.5%. Number two, the IMF is predicting that 2016 will be the fastest year of growth that you've had in the last 5 years. Number 4, you yourself have projected a 4.4% growth, which is high. The People's Progressive Party, Civic, while in government, we navigated through the world's worst economic and financial crisis that we have seen since the Great Depression. And during that time, we've not only seen our fastest growth, but we also see the highest velocity of money in circulation, the highest degree of construction to properties and renovations and buying and selling, cars being registered at 100 a day, the registration series finishing in 8 months. Those are the kind of things that you've seen under our government in terrible global circumstances. And you better hope and pray every single day that oil prices don't spike and they remain high, because immediately you will throw your balance of payments out of whack. And once you throw your balance of payments out of whack, you end up with eating into your reserves. And once you start eating into your reserves, your currency starts depreciating very quickly too. Very quickly. Now turning to youth. I simply cannot stand here and support a budget which says that it will increase and promote youth unemployment. And this is not me saying this. This is not the People's Progressive Party saying this. This is the very own budget speech that's saying this. On page 60, it says, Mr. Speaker, apart from youth unemployment, this budget seeks to promote youth health and safety. I cannot stand here in all honesty and support a budget which promotes youth unemployment. And maybe it was a slip. Maybe it was. A Freudian one, I would argue. But that is what the people on the street are complaining about. The lack of attention to detail by this government. The lack of professionalism. And then you say that you've laid a national youth policy. You've had a national youth policy completed. But why hasn't it been shared in this parliament? Why haven't we been consulted about it? We are still the representatives of everybody in this nation, just like you are. It should have been placed here. It should have had consultation right here. And I, along with a lot of other people, want to know why it is that young people were never appointed to this cabinet. We always wanted to know, and now we finally got the answer. In the budget presentation on the same page 60, it says that young people are not ready for leadership. Young people are not ready for leadership. And that is the same kind of insouciant attitude that is being displayed in regards to youth. And on the one hand, in the same speech you say, on the one hand, you've got a lot of ideas from young people. But then on the other hand, you're saying that we're not worthy enough to be appointed to a cabinet. 14 minutes, huh? Now stop using young people to get elected. Stop using young people for our ideas. And then when it comes time to make the appointments, you leave us out in the cold. And this nation is left with a real GOG, a government of geriatrics.
I'll remember, you have 2 minutes more.
We on this side of the house, actually, the People's Progressive Party, we didn't just speak, we did. We had some of the youngest ministers in this nation. When Irfan was appointed, he was 8 years old. Priya was 30 years old. Anil, Robert.
I'll remember the mode of address is honorable member or comrade. Thank you.
My comrades were in their early 30s when they were appointed. And And now let's look at the budget for the youth sector. The contract employment for youth and culture has moved, the contract employment has moved from $26 million to $150 million. When you were in opposition, you claimed that contract workers is corruption and cronyism. Now you're in government, it's jumped over 150%. It's just becoming ridiculous. And now that we're on the issue of corruption, this is where the corruption starts or continues. We see people getting employed without advertisements, without public programs.
Honourable member, your time is up.
For 5 minutes.